Hello, ladies and gentlemen. This is Professor Hamamoto. It is 4 p.m. Pacific Daylight Time. It is June 14th, year 2024. The new year is going by very, very quickly. And so will this particular talk. So let's launch right into it. As you, if you've been following my channel here, know that one of my recurrent complaints is, or kvetches, let's call it, my whinging or whining has to do with retread comedians. And that is the question of today is why are so many political pundits retread comedians? And I'm going to attempt to answer that question. By the way, welcome all the people here in the live chat. You're going to see the show in its unadulterated, untruncated, unedited form, because typically what happens is tube view contacts means is, oh, you're violating someone's copyright. And so I have to go back and edit that out. So when you're watching live, you get to see the unexpurgated version. So welcome one and welcome all. So to answer that question, I turned to one particular piece of scholarship. Let's see if the glare, it's called That's Not Funny. And the subtitle is How the Right Makes Comedy Work for Them, right? As if the left liberal end of the spectrum, which most comedians seem to embrace, I might be wrong on that, seem to be the majority, but this is by Professors Matt Siekowitz and Professor Nick Marks, right? University of California Press, right? Now, there's one glaring admission. There's an index here, of course, and there's a bibliography, but there's one omission, a glaring, unforgivable omission, and that is that they did not cite the pioneering landmark study by one Professor Hamamoto, that's me, called Nervous Laughter, Television Situation Comedy and the Liberal Democratic Ideology, published in 1989. Now, whether they recognized it or not, I was there first, and I was one of the people who, because the attention span and the history of this field goes by so quickly, even though it's a relatively new area, which was pioneered by me and my mentor, J. Fred McDonald. I always like to mention him when I brag about myself, because he's the person who discovered me and rescued me from obscurity and helped me get the original contract with the publisher for Nervous Laughter. So there's a history here, and more specifically, this is a topic that I've been looking at quite closely. Now, over the past several years, maybe, I guess 10 years, let's say generously, we've seen the rise of the comedian slash political pundit. And I was trying to think, when did I first make that connection? When did I first observe that these funny men all of a sudden became really serious about politics? Well, and this stems to my own interest in television production in general, but I used to live in the LA area, so I could get to the studios. You're either going to be in New York or LA if you want to see shows being done in front of a live audience. So I was able to go to a up and coming figure. He was known as a comedian by the name of Bill Maher, and I went to his first show, his original show, not the first episode, but the original show. And he's been on for maybe 2 decades by now, going on 30 years. He's a fixture. If you don't know, maybe we'll take a look at him in action in a moment here, but most of you are well acquainted with him, or at least you've seen him or heard about him. And that's, to me, that particular show is called Politically Incorrect, by the way. So he knew where the society was going. This is long before the DEI and Antifa and all the censorship that started to infect the university. Some of the infection is being squeezed out, fortunately. I think the purgation of one Claudine Gay is a good a good beginning, but there are top-level university administrators who need to be removed because they're basically pawns for the corporatists and the NATO, the United Nations, enforcing a uniform ideological curriculum on supposedly free thinking and creative minds at the university. And of course, the professors follow suit. And it's only proper that I bring this book into discussion and show, or at least assert to you that there are a couple libtards, right? They truly believe that so-called right-wing comedy is going to bring down the American Republic, and it's very, in certain parts, it's cleverly written. I'm still reading it, but you can guess the approach. It's going to be hammering on certain sort of characters, and one of these characters, and I'm not sure what his politics are because I really didn't even know about him until he came into the sights of Taylor Swift. Most everybody has heard of her by now, right? Taylor Swift and her gang of Swifties who defend her to the death, right? And she was at the well, I'll show you right now. She was at the Golden Globe Awards, the recent one, and Jo Koy rather. Well, I'll talk about in more detail. His birth name is Joseph Glenn Herbert. He's half Filipino. His mother's Filipina. His father, I think, probably was a serviceman who was quote unquote white. And he was greeted with stony silence or nervous laughter, which is the name of that book that I wrote. People didn't really know how to handle it, especially if you were telling a joke about Taylor Swift. She could have you eliminated, perhaps. So let's take a look at that, and then we'll move directly into the talk proper.
Between the Golden Globes and the NFL, on the Golden Globes, we have fewer camera shots of Taylor Swift. I swear. There's just more to go to here. Sorry about that.
Ooh. Wow. She was shooting daggers at him. And you know it was a setup, and that's part of the argument of this talk here. I believe that Jo Koy was sandbagged by the producers and by the comedy establishment because they're not ready to have the yellow man or the Asian man or woman serve in the capacity of political pundit. That's still reserved for a certain subset of comedian, but they don't want the descendants of the Mongol hordes to get in that position of offering opinion and commentary. But I'm getting ahead of myself. That's Taylor Swift. The cameraman, the director, the producer of the show, they had a shot ready, a reaction shot ready when he told that joke. And it's all timed out and scripted very carefully, as you might imagine. And they wanted to catch that reaction. Maybe even Taylor Swift was alerted ahead of time how to act or how to respond to that. So it went flat, and that sort of set the tone for the entire monologue. So that's the only impression I had of Jo Koy before learning about him through this route here. And if you want to learn the backstory, I'll let you research it yourself and watch the YouTubes. I don't want to waste time on the pseudo controversy, which most of this media is all about, right? So that's all I knew about him. But I looked at his background. I knew he was Asian. I didn't really know where he hailed from, where he went to school, about his history, his personal history. So I started watching his material, and I found it, much to my surprise, I'll admit to you, he's really good. He's funny. And part of the purpose of this talk here is to share with you that this guy's career is far from over. I think in being positioned as the fall guy in this way, if he's smart, he knows, if his people know how to handle this, he could turn it around and make it work to his benefit. But rather than allowing me my opinion on here, why don't you watch his routine? Because he's had a number. I don't know the exact number. Certainly not as much as Robin Williams did on HBO or George Carlin, but he could be in that league at some point. Although he's fairly mature a comedian. He's 52 years old. He's not a rising comic. He should be hitting his stride, or should have hit his stride along, but maybe about 10 years ago. So let's take a look at his routine, which I found interesting. If you're offended by it, then please switch the channel right now or make a comment. Thankfully, the virus of political correctness and censorship in the university seems to be going away. All those little radical lesbian feminists that used to come to my class with the pink hair and the piercings and try to sweat me, because I taught a class in sexuality, and the lesbians said, "Oh, it's not sexuality, it's sexualities." Right? There's not two genders. There's multiple. You know those stories. You've been watching my channel. So that's over. We've pretty much put them aside, and maybe they've grown up and they took the piercings off and let their hair grow back to the regular color. I don't know about some of these administrators. They're still kind of around, and they have to be eased out the door, because most of the American public now understands the big con that's been perpetrated on these hardworking parents sending their children to school for the last, I guess the con has been going on for the past 20 years or so, 10, 20 years. So here's Jo Koy doing some politically incorrect humor about how to tell Asians apart. And excuse me for laughing along with you. No, don't excuse me. I really don't care. Right? Humor is supposed to be subversive. It's supposed to make you think and feel uncomfortable, as well as make you happy and laugh and be joyous. Here we go. Jo Koy.
And I look.
Well, you can watch his whole set there. I think that's from one of his specials there. That's Jo Koy. Just a little bit of background there. I think he grew up in the Pacific Northwest, I think, in state of Washington. I can't remember exactly, but he got his chops together doing open mics at like probably small clubs or bars in the Las Vegas here. I think he was living in Vegas, and some talent guy, some guy from LA, because it's not that far. You can drive from LA to Las Vegas, and caught his act, and before you know it, he was doing some big time shows. So I wish him well. We'll, if we have some time, see a bit that he did on Hawaiians. He's taking a big risk here, because Hawaiians, when I first knew them when I was a kid, they were very cool and mellow, and they liked everybody, and they even liked other ethnicities. But more recently, people like Frank Marshall Davis, the radicals from and the Democrats and leftists and communists who moved to Hawaii, riled up all the different ethnicities against each other. So Hawaiians are really pissed off about everybody. So I don't know how he's going to be received here, but I'm talking about Jo Koy when he talks about Hawaiian language. But he does it out of love, and I think perhaps it'll be a good sign when we see Jo Koy hitting the college circuit, because that's when those comedy shows that I used to see from up and coming comedians and musicians too in college, those are great. They're not quite headliners yet, but there's still plenty of talent there to admire. He's well beyond that. He's at the pro level, but as you know, comedians who are politically incorrect like that have been barred up until recently. There's this one character who came to my attention more recently. I don't know how young he is. He looks like he's about maybe in his late 20s, early 30s, but he started getting featured on shows like Alex Jones. He'd come on, and he's another fast talking kid. He's kind of punky. His name's Nick Fuentes. I don't know what his ethnicity is. I think he's a Whitino. He has a Hispanic last name, but he's a Whitino, like a Beto O'Rourke is a Whitino, because being ethnic is supposed to get you over these days, right? Anyway, he's kind of obnoxious. I'd agree with any libtards who think that he's a weasel and a dweeb. And here he's getting called on the carpet by some other person, probably a comedian, I don't know, and being commented. So this is what I'm doing is a meta commentary. You'll see Cenk Uygur. I don't think he was a comedian. He's just really an angry guy, and he's from the Young Jerks, right? That's actually the Young Turks. You know this. Him and that woman Anna, I can't remember her name is, but he's the chief guy. He's always he's gonna one day his head's gonna explode while he's on air. But he's going in on Nick Fuentes here in this reaction video. Let's take a quick look. Got a lot of material to cover here.
The woman?
No.
So how are you telling other people how to behave towards women when you yourself have not had any actual physical, interaction with them in a romantic capacity, or in fact in any capacity? If you are looking to some other regimes around the world that do think that women are half the value of a man, I have to question what kind of a person who's had no experience with women is in a position to basically promote these ideas.
Well, I'm having an experience with a woman right now, and I've had lots of experiences with women in my life, not romantically per se, but I've talked to enough women. I've been in, I've known enough women to know sort of what's going on.
How many times did we tell you? These are all like these incel clowns, these right-wing, anti-Semitic, racist clowns. They can't get laid. That's the #1 source of their frustration. And when I say that, they're gonna be even more mad. But guys, you're not like, you think.
There he is. He's even more obnoxious than Nick Fuentes, Cenk Uygur. I'm sorry, I mispronounced his name. I don't watch the show often enough to get it straight. So the point is, I don't think it comes from the comedy world, but the point is that this is the level of American political discourse. And I think it's unique to the United States. However, there are other countries that are beginning to imitate the American model of serious political discourse. We have, for example, a president of a country, Ukraine, right, who is hanging out with the Prime Minister of Britain right now at this very moment. Vladimir Zelensky, he was a comedian, right? He was the person that's sent over by the United Nations to hand over Ukraine to NATO control, but it doesn't seem to be working out for him. But if you look into the American scene, he wasn't a comedian as such, but he's been in comedy movies, and he became president of the United States, and that would be President Ronald Reagan. He was in a film, 1951, Bedtime for Bonzo, right? This Ronald Reagan was an actor, in case you didn't know. And then he became governor of California and eventually became president of the United States. And according to Dinesh D'Souza, one of the best presidents of the United States we've ever seen. That tells you a lot about Dinesh D'Souza. He was not a stand-up comedian, but he might have missed his calling. He's a Republican. He's a right-winger himself. And I've been watching him since some Republican Party hacks recruited him out of Dartmouth College. I think he wrote for the conservative newspaper there. Then we have people like Rishi Sunak, right? Prime Minister. Let me see. I don't think I have a clip of them right now. There's a character here. I assumed he was a stand-up comedian. His name's Greg Gutfeld, because he's fairly entertaining, but he's unusual in that he's conservative. He's unabashedly conservative politically, and it stands to reason that he would have carved a niche for himself in on the Fox network or the Fox television. Maybe he's the replacement for Tucker Carlson. So he has his own show. I think the most recent, he's had 2 or 3 different iterations, but the most recent one is Gutfeld! Exclamation point, right? And here's the promo. We won't watch all of it in case you're unfamiliar with him. Fox is really pushing him because they realize that this is what the audience seems to want, or that's what they're going to provide them. And that's a funny man who talks serious issues with a humorous slant to it. So here's Greg Gutfeld.
Gutfeld in Your Life, Greg's brand new weeknight show debuts this Monday at 11 p.m. Eastern, and he's set to rattle the late night landscape. Check out his face plastered on a billboard deep in the heart of Hollywood, overlooking Hollywood Boulevard. Greg, you've been crushing it on the weekends. You're going to crush it during the weekdays. I'm so excited for your show.
Thank you, Katie. There's going to be 5 times more crushing because Saturday was just one night. You got 5 nights. By the way, if I had known about that billboard, that's across from Jimmy Kimmel's studio. I would love to have done my own. I would love to have defaced my own face. To draw a mustache on there would have been really fun. But I love where it is. And by the way, Katie, do you remember the first show you were on? Red Eye, right?
Red Eye, yes.
Yes, and
I took a bus.
The key to the Gutfeld show is like, we always look for new people. We always look for people that had, like, you were fresh out of college, I think, and because now we're gonna have more guests and be able to take more risks. So you're gonna see a lot of interesting and unusual people that you don't normally see on TV.
Well,
You can see Trey Gowdy right there, right above my head, former congressman. So yeah. This is the political discourse of America. And that particular virus seems to be migrating across the sea. We'll get to him in a moment, in the form of one Russell Brand. He's another obnoxious guy that I can't stand. Comedians can be very, very obnoxious, even if politically you're in the same ballpark there. I don't know. It's they're always on and they're always competing. It's interesting seeing a room full of comedians all together trying to outcompete themselves. And in the case of Russell Brand, he just talks too fast, right? And there's all these jump cuts that are put together. I don't know who his writers are, but I think they're under the mistaken assumption the faster you talk, the funnier you're going to be. Either that, or even if a joke goes flat, it's going to be over in a moment, so you can move on to another topic. Nonetheless, he's trying to, as I'll show you in a moment, grapple with some serious issues, especially in light of revelations concerning the Epstein milieu, right? The Jeffrey Epstein drops. The paper, the tranche of documents have been coming out. We'll get to that in a moment here. Joe Rogan. Let's see here if I can find a little clip of his. You know who what Joe Rogan is. I can't remember the amount of his most recent contract. I think it's half million. I don't know. It's in the hundreds of millions of dollars. I don't know what the term is, but he's doing quite well, and I can't remember exactly how many YouTube subscriptions he has, but it's in the millions. I think 5.7 million, something like that. Hugely popular, and most of you know that he came out of mixed martial arts when he was a kid or younger, and won a championship or 2 or 3, and did a host stint on, I think it was Fear Factor, right? That's what American society has been all about for the past 20 years, living in fear, naked and scared, Fear Factor. So he was doing that. And then as the podcast universe started to open up, he moved in there. Some people said, hey, Joe, this is your medium. And he did stand-up, right? Now he doesn't have to go on, well, he still does probably, but he doesn't have to do the one-nighters. He can just go in his studios, light up a doobie, sit across from Elon Musk and whoever else he has on. He has a variety of guests. That's to his credit, ideologically. But he's kind of hard to pin down so far as politics are concerned. It's not that he's coy about it. I just don't think that he has a commitment to anything really serious. He's an entertainer. We have to remind ourselves that this is entertainment, despite all pretensions of being quote unquote serious. So let's see if I can find Rogan with none other than Bill Maher, right? As I mentioned earlier, right? Bill Maher. Let's see. Oh, before I go on, Dan, let me give an advertisement for myself. I didn't put it on the link here, but if you look under TNT Radio under Pele Nera Taylor like this, you can see that I had a guest shot on his show. I had 30 minutes on a 1-hour show. And here's a, a picture of me with my output, and I'm just rubbing it into these authors here who don't know my work on situation comedies. One of my books I'm holding here, Nervous Laughter, here. But this show was on this past Thursday, so if you can listen to it, I think it was really good because not because I was on it as such, but because the host thought I was going to talk about pop music, and I did, and thought, well, how serious can that be? But we went from Justin Bieber and Swedish pop music from ABBA to Taylor Swift, and from there it proceeded to get very, very dark. So rather than giving it away, go to that link right there, TNT Radio. It's a new network. It's only 2 years old. I wasn't really aware of it, and it's a one hour show. I take the last 25 minutes or so. There's a professor who's talking about some other topic I can't remember offhand that precedes me, and tell me what you think, because he asks me, the host, Mr. Taylor, asks me, what do you think is behind at bottom behind the Epstein case? And without even pondering or thinking about it, I said Satanism, and he was taken aback. Right. This is something that to his credit, Ricky Gervais, he's a British comedian, and I'll show you his routine in a moment. But that's the one area that these comedians and especially the pundits will not go. The first comedian / pundit that crosses that threshold and deals with what's going on behind the Epstein phenomenon, because remember, he's just a front man. I hope you know that. It doesn't end with him. That's just the public face of it. And Ghislaine Maxwell, she's in prison, but it goes much deeper than that. Again, if you want to find the deep story that goes back years and years, and she's still covering it now, check out Kirby Summers. She does some very deep dives in her Substack in particular, because if this stuff went on YouTube, it probably would be taken down. So the printed word still, and the comedians are still the repositories of this forbidden knowledge and information that is vital to our survival there. So check me out there. Check out my books, if you will. Just go to the library and find them. You don't have to buy them. They're at every college or university library if you want to follow up on that. So let's see. Let's take a look at Bill Maher, and one more anecdote about him, if I can find it here. Let's see. The problem with this system here is that there's no label, so I have to kind of guess what the video is. Okay, here, I guessed right. That's the show I mentioned, Politically Correct, and it just came to mind that it was I think it was a path. He's not giving himself enough credit, Bill Maher. It was a path-breaking show because he anticipated all the Antifa and the woke plague that was visited upon us several years in advance of that. And as I mentioned before, I got to see one of his shows. It was quite good because he's doing it live. I think, and to answer my own question, I think that's one of the reasons why stand-up comedians are held in such a high premium for this type of show. Number one, the Americans want to be entertained, right? For whatever we do, part of our sensibility is that it has to be fun. Right? Think Disneyland, think McDonald's, right? We don't want to just go in there and get a hamburger and a order of fries. We want a happy meal. Everything has to be a happy, joyful, playful experience. Even who gets to carry the nuclear weapon detonator called the football, the president of the United States or the whatever world leaders out. It has to be fun. It has to have a punchline. It has to be a one-liner. So Bill Maher figured that out very early on, and since then he's had a legion of imitators. Bill Maher, we have to give him credit for that. Going on, I guess this is third decade. And again, my main caveat to you is recall that he is an entertainer. He is a comedian. He is not. You can take him seriously on one level, but it's not something that you should really stake your life on or make decisions based on one man's opinion, especially his. Or these other characters, Joe Rogan, yeah, more power to him. But he's got tons of young men who are low testosterone or something, because I think most of his audiences are lads, are young men. Because, he was a martial artist and all that, and he's funny and he's profane. And we need that in our society. And apparently the network or the people who are behind these YouTube characters realize that. You understand that the networks have died and transformed, and they've been reborn on YouTube. You understand that? That's why I have 12,000 subscribers after doing this for 3 years now. And some of these dorks like Nick Fuentes have millions or whatever. It depends on who that want to promote, which brings me to the point that hopefully you're beginning to understand, is that this is all pro wrestling that's going on here. Nothing, Chick Wigger gets all upset and he's about ready to blow a gasket, but he is in on the joke that these guys all go out to dinner afterwards, right? They're all buddies, they're all friends, just like WWF, just like much of the American electoral politics, right? You know your David Icke, you know about the false dialectic and all this. It's the same way with the comedian people. And that's what these guys miss. They said, oh, these liberals are the salvation. The comedians, they're brilliant. They're going to save the republic, whereas the conservatives, the Republicans, the libertarians, the Nick Fuentes of the world are going to destroy everything we've built up. And they don't get that it's coming from the same stinking kettle of fish here. So I'm going to keep reminding you about that, false dialectics. And it's election season. I gave you a talk. I'm not going to repeat it on Vivek Ramaswamy. And the fact that there are 3 brown people running for office now, including Dr. Shiva and Nikki Haley. Why is that? Is that accidental? And there's a brown prime minister, Rishi Sunak of the United Kingdom, that is hanging out with Zelensky, trying to carve up that part of the world for the crown and country, right? So it's a giant club, and you're not in it, neither am I. I was going to show George Carlin, but everybody knows him by now. He's a comedy god. Let's move on then to one Russell Brand. He's pretty hard to miss. And take a look at what he has to say about contemporary. What's interesting about him and kind of irritating is that he's not an American. He's British, right? He's an Englishman, Russell Brand. He was a stand-up comedian. But the thing is, Americans think that anybody who's of an Anglo-Saxon background, whether they're Australian, Canadian, or English, or British, or American, of course, is an American or an expectant American, whereas your Asian people, like Jo Koy, are perpetual foreigners. So that kind of answers my own question, is how come guys like him are not in these political commentator positions? And there's more talent out there other than Jo Koy, but they can only go so far, and they have to have ethnic content. They have to have ethnic humor, like on accents and immigration and whatnot. They can never do humor that's full ideological spectrum, and they definitely cannot be in a position to comment on American politics. Even someone like myself, I'm not a comedian, of course, although you might find me amusing at points, but someone like myself is seen as a permanent foreigner. I'm a forever visitor. I'm a forever alien here, despite being 3rd generations of America. So I think that is, to answer my question, the barrier that people like Jo Koy will be facing. And I myself had dedicated my career to busting barriers, and this is one of them. okay? And I predict it's going to happen. There's going to be a regular. And I'm not talking about Dr. Sanjay Gupta, because he does the medical stuff. We expect that. Or what's that other guy? Fareed Zakaria? Fareed Zakaria. Yeah, I forgot about him, but he's still around apparently. He's a CNN guy. They didn't just pick that brown guy out of a hat, Fareed Zakaria, right? He was brought through by Consulate and Foreign Relations, and his family happens to be very close to Tata of India, TATA, which is the largest company that comes out of India. The second one is Infosys, by the way, whose co-founder is the father-in-law of Sunak, right? His wife, he's married to the daughter of a man that's worth $4 million American dollars, the co-founder of Infosys. So again, that harkens back to another piece of work that I've done called Servitors of Empire, right? Empire, British Empire, American Empire, pick your empire, contemporary empire, banking empire, using Asian people in a certain function to serve the empire. And now they're using the South Asian people for that purpose. And once they've used them up, they'll wind up like a Jeffrey Epstein or a Ghislaine Maxwell or whoever else, right? I mean, I'm not wishing that on them. I'm just making an observation here. Okay, so let's move on. Let's take a look at Russell Brand for those of you who are not familiar with his act. And it is an act, okay? It is an act. It's scripted. He's got tons of writers. I don't know how many of them, but I'd say at least a half a dozen. To put a show like this together requires a lot of labor, a lot of creative and intellectual labor.
So
There you go. And if you slowed down his monologue and you picked apart some of his assertions, which were well grounded in what we've been reading in the recent releases, that's more information that the so-called legacy media is able to impart, and even some of these comedians are not going to go that far. So I have to give Russell Brand credit for edging up into that domain. And the full story of the Epstein milieu, which is still being told right now, is not going to be introduced by even independent media, indie media, or legacy media. It's going to be introduced by people like Brand, who are giving it sort of a lighthearted spin. But listen to it again, cross-check some of the information he's imparting, and you'll understand what the Anglo-American political system is truly about at bottom. And it makes the American election the electioneering going on right now, it makes it look like a giant farce, which it is largely, right? Even Donald Trump's victimhood and being raked over the coals by the opposition, or it's wrestling, it's championship wrestling, as I've already stated before, right? So that's Russell Brand. Let's continue, or actually move the timeline even further, because there's a countryman of his who was edging up to the dark reality of the American political and social system as led by the international celebrity circuit, and that's Ricky Gervais. And this is back in 2020 when he did the MC job that Jo Koy blew, supposedly. I think he did a decent job. I watched the monologue, but Jo Koy was preceded by Ricky Gervais. And in the one in 2020, he's calling out all the self-worshiping celebrities in the audience who knew about Epstein, who are part of that milieu, and they're sitting there in front of middle America and the audience around the world, laughing up their sleeves at what they're up to, and our worship of their performances, right? Their ultimate performances is that is that there are human beings that we need to consider seriously. They're stick figures, they're caricatures. Most of them aren't even actors. Some of them do have acting backgrounds, but most of them are just animated caricatures of celebrity by now, right? So let's take a look at that monologue by Ricky Gervais in case you haven't seen it. I think this was a real path breaker right here. And then we'll finish up again with Jo Koy. And I'll have some words about that. Here we go. There you go. That's a classic one. Now, there's a particular characteristic of comedy, and this is according to practitioners of it themselves. It's called the art of, not kitsch, but the art of the kvetch. Right before I leave here and conclude here, it's spelled Kvetch. Right, it's Yiddish, and that means it's a verb. It means to complain, but a person who complains a lot can be called a kvetch, which is a noun. And the reason I'm talking about the art of kvetch, because that seemed to be the engine of a lot of humor, especially Jewish humor. And they are the group, by the way, there's a specific group that pioneered a lot of modern comedy. And it goes deep into their traditions of theater, Yiddish theater. And they have their own, it's called the Borscht Belt. That is their own comedy circuit for middle class and working class Jews who had their own resorts, upstate New York, Grossinger's and so forth, where a lot of comedians gained fame and later made it to the Ed Sullivan Show and whatnot. So a lot of their humor comes out of complaining, right? Even Moses was complaining, and the people that were following Moses to the promised land complained about everything. That's probably why he didn't go to the promised land, because he'd be living a bunch of whiners. So it goes back into history there. And the reason I mention this is because sometimes when you lose the kvetch element, the complaining, which are legitimate, and it's funny too, whether it's about political situation, your own interpersonal. There's a lot of humor, kvetch humor about wives and husbands and vice versa, right? But when you take out the kvetch, then the kvetch crashes. And this is what happened, I believe, to Jon Stewart, right? Jon Stewart took the kvetch out of his humor. He was a stand-up comedian. He had his own show. He was kind of like Bill Maher. He was blazing a trail with the Jon Stewart show. And then at some point, I'm still trying to figure it out. At some point, he started to take himself seriously. He started to think he was really a pundit instead of pretending to be one. And he started to become a scold. He started to become a male Karen. He started to become part of the problem that we saw of censorship. And he became very vocal about it, right? The humor became humorless, right? So that's what happens when kvetch crashes. And by the way, that's not his name. He anglicized his name, Jon Stewart. His name is Leibovitz, right? And there's a lot of Jewish jokes about Jews who change their names and they anglicize themselves, and they change it from an ethnic identity to an Anglo identity. He's one of them. His brother is Larry Leibovitz. Jon Leibovitz has a brother who's a Wall Streeter, right? He's part of this problem that Jon Stewart is pretending to correct, but his own families are involved in creating these. I'm not saying Larry Leibovitz is a crook, right? But he's in that realm. He's working in that field, right? So maybe that's why he decided to become a serious critic of American society, so we wouldn't pay attention to the real crooks in that are in play here. So yeah, he was the host of the Daily Show. I was on the Daily Show, but he was on vacation at the time. and they had a substitute, but he sent his crew, his producers, they sent him out to UC Davis, University of California, Davis, to interview Professor Hamamoto, me, because they thought it was really funny that I had, on my own dime, to my own budget, and wrote a theoretical piece about it, that I had made my own all Asian American porno, my own adult film. And so they thought they'd come and make a mockery of me, and it turned out that I flipped it out on them. In fact, the whole exercise was a troll on them, saying, "Hey, how come there's no yellow people in television or in sitcoms?" And there have been subsequently to my intervention, my scholarly intervention, right? So I had my star turn on The Daily Show, but I didn't get to be in the studio. They came out to me, in the campus and they had to persuade me. I said no. I said I'm not going to do it, and I made them work for it. And then when they finally did land me, they agreed that to certain terms that I made, because what they do is they cut away and make you say something stupid or appear to say something stupid with that. And I said no, it's got to be a continuous cut. And so I got my licks in. That's my Daily Show story with Jon Stewart. And the woman that came out was Samantha Bee. She was the reporter. And I've talked about Wiccans before. She comes from a Wiccan family. Her mother and father were witches. She talks about that. She wrote an autobiography of this. And in meeting her, because she was the one that interviewed me when I was on the Daily Show, I started thinking about how many of these people in show business are involved in witchcraft. Wiccans deny that they're Satanists, but for me, the distinction's very, very subtle, if there is a distinction at all. So I started probing, and subsequently, and this is for another talk. Subsequently, I found out that the entertainment business is saturated with people like that. And I'm telling you this because this helps to explain why we're having these problems that we are with, that are only now being unveiled through all the Epstein documents and the reportage. People like Kirby Summers, who have been purposely kind of ignored by the mainstream media so they can rip off our material and use it for their own aggrandizement, right? Starting to come out now. And so let's take the discussion away from me and return it to Jon Stewart, who is probably the most obnoxious clown pundit around currently, because he's a kvetch gone serious. He's still complaining, but there's no humor, there's no love in it, there's no affection. It's just condemnation, and we're tired of it. It's not going to travel very well, right? I think he might be angling for political office, and that wouldn't be the first time. We've already mentioned Zelensky. He became the president of his country. Maybe John Leibovitz. Gerald Ford. That was not his real name either. I think he had changed it. So maybe we'll go for it. Here we go. John Leibovitz.
People who say, yes, you have to indict him because he has in fact broken the laws, and there are other people who say this is going to turn him into a martyr. This is his path through redemption.
Sure.
How do you think about it?
Oh, the law should always take into account someone's popularity. I think that's. I mean, what's happened to our country? It's as though you can't even commit financial fraud anymore. You can't inflate the value of your properties when you need a loan and then deflate it with taxes. I mean, the next thing you know, they're going to send you to jail instead of your lawyer and your accountant and your campaign manager and everyone else around you. The idea that someone may face accountability who's that rich and powerful is outrageous, and this country shouldn't stand for it.
So there are people.
Okay, I'm sure you guessed or were able to pick up the sarcasm. There's nothing worse than a sarcastic moralist. Moralists are bad in themselves, but the sarcastic moralist, that takes the cake. All right, so let's end up. I had to go in on Jon Stewart to a certain extent, because this is the type of humor that's going to lead us to down the wrong road, let's say. So I'm trying to get him do him a favor, unless he's running for office, which I think is part of the agenda. So let's conclude. Let's complete the circle with Jo Koy again doing part of his, I think it was a comedy special, a routine on Hawaiian vowels. Okay. I know there's some people who will be very sensitive if you're native Hawaiian who have been ripped off. I'm not just talking about in the days of Captain Cook and the plundering of the New Englanders who came there and set up shop. But I'm talking about the Maui situation and the governor of Hawaii, who is a carpetbagger. I think he is. He's a haole, and he's a Democrat, right? And you know what happened to Maui. I don't have to go into that, and you probably can speculate as well as I do about what happened, what really happened there. So let's finish with Jo Koy on the Hawaiian situation, and I'll come back to wrap it up with you here. Yes, I'm sorry for laughing. That's just such raunchy humor. It has no place on TubeView. So I'm glad you're watching the live stream. They're probably TubeView is probably going to tell me to take it down. There's going to be all these gaps in this particular talk, but that's okay. I needed to share my thoughts with you. And in closing, I'd like to say, please bring on Jo Koy as a full-time panelist for one of these political discussion shows. I think he'd be a great addition to the wonders of the American society and our grounding in humor. That is our salvation, ladies and gentlemen. Right? You can throw anything you like at us, Mr. and Mrs. Globalist, but we will laugh in your face and just keep on carrying on. All right? And that goes doubly true for the people here in the live stream. Thank you for being with me today and chuckling along with our friends, the comedians. Okay, ladies and gentlemen, we'll see you next week. I'll have a really exciting show for you next Sunday, God willing. Thank you. Bye.